Hello everybody, welcome back to another video here for EDU 552, the Russell Text Literature for Children. This week is dealing with chapter 10, which is about nonfiction text. Nonfiction texts are really kind of the world I live in with social studies, so I'm pretty used to nonfiction. This week though, the video is actually going to be one I filmed a while back. I thought we had to do one for chapter 2 on picture books, and I guess we didn't have to, so it was never counted, and I really like that video a lot, so I wanted to still share it. And the book that I used was called We Are the Ship, the Story of Negro League Baseball, and it is very much a nonfiction book. It's about real events, what really happened, and kind of chronicles the life of the Negro baseball leagues. And so the video that will be attached to this and edited to it is from that. So kind of this really talks about the illustrations and the way the book is worded and everything, and I really like this book a lot, so I wanted to use this video again. But I will touch on some things that the book shares that are specific to the nonfiction chapter. So first off, obviously nonfiction texts have a purpose and an audience, and this book has an audience really for everybody, but especially for sports fans. And ironically, in the Jim Trelease read aloud book, this book came up multiple times, saying that it would make a great read aloud for like a father and a son. So I genuinely believe that this book breaks down barriers by showing a lot about the Negro Leagues and its history and its amazing players that really should have been in integrated baseball. But it's much broader than that too, right? Like anybody can read this type of story, and the writing style that draws you in, it kind of feels as though like you're being told a story about the baseball league from like an old-timey person, like they're reminiscing about their childhood and their younger life, and it's a pretty cool read. So hopefully when you watch the video, it'll talk about that. A lot of facts are presented within this book. It's more of a narrative type text as opposed to like a textbook. And there's about 10 chapters inside of the book, each one dealing with a different era or person or section of the baseball leagues themselves. And the writing is really beautiful, I think, because it just really draws the reader in to the story in a way that a lot of nonfiction texts necessarily wouldn't. There are a table of contents, there's a bibliography, there's a glossary for terms that are used in the book. The illustrations are by far the strongest part of this book. Well, maybe not by far, but they're certainly a reason why this book is well known. As you'll see in the video, the illustrations and the paintings and they're just amazing. They're just so fantastic. I will let the rest of the video speak for itself on that, but you just gotta take my word for it and watch it. It's amazing. And then finally, that this book primarily deals with history, right, in human society. So what America was like 100 years ago, and what the history of baseball is, the history of America, right? America's pastime is baseball, and I guess in a way kind of represents what life was like back in the day and the strides that have been made since then. So hopefully this type of book will be fun for you to look at through multiple lenses. As you can see, a lot of books intersect, and enjoy the video. Hello everybody, welcome to my book review for this week. This book has been reviewed for chapter 2 of Literature for Children by David Russell. Chapter 2 in the book is about cultural diversity and reading around the world. The book that I chose came up in Literature for Children and also in Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook, and that is We Are the Ship, the Story of Negro League Baseball. I'm a big baseball fan. I think I know some stuff about baseball. Played baseball my whole life, and throughout the time you only hear about Major League Baseball, and you hear about Jackie Robinson coming in and breaking down the barrier, but very rarely do you hear about the actual Negro Leagues themselves. Aside from maybe Satchel Paige, that's probably all you're going to get when you're a child of hearing about the Negro Leagues. But this book breaks down that barrier, and it allows you to really learn about who the main players were, who the all-stars were, what the league was all about, and what the players had to do to overcome all the significant challenges that they faced in their life. So the first thing I really want to point out in this book is the illustrations. Kadir Nelson wrote and illustrated this book, and the pictures are absolutely phenomenal. They jump off the page, they capture your eye right away. And I'll show you a few pictures here just so you can get a sense of what the images are like. Throughout the book, it's mostly men that are depicted and shown because that was who the Negro League players were at the time. And these images really set the tone for what the players wore, what the league was like, but also how vibrant and exciting the league was. Multiple times throughout the book, Mr. Nelson writes about how exciting the league was and how they were doing different things that the American League and National League just weren't doing with white players. Sometimes it was like jokes and things, but other times it was just the speed of the game. Players were more daring on the field. They were more daring to take a steal or to bunt the ball and to just have different plays. And I think that's really awesome. So like a picture here is just so stunning to me. It captures so many different pictures and just emotions in that play. And it really brings the teams and the humans themselves to life. It humanizes the players and gives them a voice, and when at other times they really would not be given a voice in our history. Throughout the book, there's singular silhouettes of players or just paintings of the players. And there's also team pictures of the teams that played during the time. These pictures just really show how strong and charismatic the players were. When you think about pictures and images of African Americans in this country coming out during the 1920s and 30s, it was very far from flattering. And even though this book was made in 2008, I think to show images and illustrations of Black players from that era in such a strong light, it really rewrites a narrative of what we thought, or what I should say American history thought of Black people at the time. Now, this book itself, it's written in a way that almost feels like it's a grandfather talking to their grandson about the league. Like, it's written in a way of they're like, oh, this player did this, and don't you know that he did that? And I think it's really cool. It has like this nostalgic, old-timey feeling. The author says in his afterward letter that he tried to write it as like an inclusive thing. If this was like all the players, this is what they would be saying, and this is how they kind of talked at the time. And I think that's really cool. In multiple of the books that we've read for class, this book came up multiple times in different chapters. For literature for children, it came up in this cultural diversity section. In Jim Trelease's book, it came up for cultural diversity, also like great illustrations, and finally is like how to get men to read to their kids. And I think anybody could read this book, but it definitely will be pretty cool, like a father and son reading this book, maybe even in the summertime when the kid's playing Little League Baseball. Just a really cool thing to have happen. And it's written in a conversational way where it really would engage somebody in a really cool read aloud. And the pictures themselves are always of somebody or a team that is involved on the page right next to it. So you're never like flipping around to see like, oh, where is this person in the book and what does he do? It's right there for you, and that's a really awesome thing from this book. This book, though, I think does a fantastic job of painting the players in such an amazing, complex light. Throughout the book, even in like a same paragraph, it would talk about the struggles that the players went through, but then also the triumphs that they had. Multiple times, they'd be talking about just like how underfunded the Negro Leagues were because the owners were really not that rich and the players did not make a lot of money. Multiple times it talked about like the accommodations for players, and one thing that really struck me was that, especially when traveling down south, this happened, but it did clarify that up north this happened as well. Different hotels would not let the players stay in their hotel because they were Black. So sometimes players would have to sleep on the bus. They would have to sleep inside of like the field house at the stadium. They would sleep at like different houses. Like people would literally like house the players for the weekend when they played there. I think that's just so almost crazy. Like you would never hear of a professional athlete, minor league or not, having to stay at somebody's house to play a baseball game that weekend. Like that's just so insane. But then it also talks about the triumphs and how by the 1930s, even though we were in the Great Depression, the Negro Leagues, some teams were outpacing and getting more people into the stadiums than the major league teams. Like specifically the teams in Washington, there was more fans going to the Negro League games than the Major League Baseball club, and that's incredible to me. That's such an interesting thing to see, like them compared to each other and what the players flat out went through. But also there was a really cool part too of like the livelihood of on the teams itself. And they said that each team had like a barbershop quartet going on. So like players would entertain themselves on the buses and the travels by like singing with each other and playing different games. And that's really cool too, because again, it humanizes these players. It's not just one person, Jackie Robinson, who changed baseball forever. It shows you that everything that happened before it, which I think is really cool. The chapters are set up in a way where like it starts off, first chapter is called inning 1 or the first inning, and it starts about the beginning of the league, and throughout each chapter is called an inning, and it goes throughout the entire book. Some really cool like tidbits and things that I saw were at one point the league was looking to continue its ideas of just expanding the game and also being the first to do things, right? Like stealing bases more and all that. But the Negro Leagues were also the first league to play games under the lights. And it was really interesting. I never knew this before. So these lights were like portable lights that they would put up. They weren't what we have today of just automatically in the stadium. And players before the game, like during the day, would set up the lights themselves. And they would like hook up the generators and all of that. And these lights would be on the field because they weren't bright like what we have today. They were bright enough to play for the most part, but they did say it was pretty tough to see under the lights. So these lights were like in the outfield. They said sometimes players would run into them on accident. There would be different spots where like balls would get caught in the lights. Like players couldn't see them as they were flying in the air. It was pretty interesting to see like that's one way that there was an innovation in the league. And then eventually, obviously, Major League Baseball has it, and almost every game is played at night now. Another really cool part in this book is chapter 5, the entire chapter, and it talks about all of the all-stars of the Negro Leagues, all the top players from each position, and gives just incredible illustrations to showcase the stadiums they played in and the players themselves, which I thought was really awesome, and how they mentored the next generation of players as they came up. On this page, Satchel Paige is playing an exhibition game at Yankee Stadium, which was sold out, which shows also that people are interested in seeing these players play, even if there was just overt racism going throughout the country and not letting them play like integrated style baseball. Chapter 6 is really cool too, because it talks about Latin American baseball, and I thought that was just such a fascinating thing to throw into this book. If you think about baseball today, it's an incredibly diverse sport. You have people from all around the world playing Major League Baseball, and especially from Latin America and like Cuba, the Dominican Republic. And it says that Negro League players during the offseason would go down to Latin America and play in one of their leagues. And that's very similar to what happens today. A lot of people, or a lot of Major League players in the offseason will go down to Latin America and play in like a winter league to keep their skills sharp, but also just have fun playing baseball. And the vibrance and amazing cultural things that come out of baseball are shown in that chapter, and made me think of the World Baseball Classic, which happens every 4 years. It's when different countries put their best players together and they go at it for baseball. It kind of like supplements the Olympics because baseball happens exactly during the same time as the Summer Olympics. So they obviously can't let all their players go do that. So they created their own program, their own tournament. And I always love watching that tournament because you get to see the players in their full like culture and their full customs with everybody on literally the same page because they're all from the same country. The United States won the last tournament in 2017. It was really cool to see like Cuba and the Dominican Republic, and the top stars that are in Major League Baseball today playing with just an extra little bit of swagger in their step because they were playing with everybody from the country and representing their country. And I always loved that, and I thought that was an amazing piece to put inside of this book. Finally, this book finishes up with Jackie Robinson, kind of saying like Jackie Robinson came, he did so much for baseball, and it really was fast-paced after that. Like Jackie Robinson came to the league, and they were like, oh my gosh, there's all this talent. Let's go get the talent. And it kind of crushed the Negro Leagues for the most part. Overall, 58 players out of the 200 that were in the Negro Leagues played in Major League Baseball, which sounds pretty awesome, but a lot of the players too were past their prime. So like Satchel Paige, even though he made it to the majors, he was past his prime. Major League Baseball never got to see him at his peak, which is really a devastating thing to think of how good he could have been. And just an incredible pitcher. He would have broken so many records and set so many records at the time. One final thing I would like to point out from this book is that the foreword is written by Hank Aaron. And Hank Aaron died just a few months ago from when this is being filmed, a few months ago, and he's the home run king. He did it without steroids. He hit the most home runs, and there's a famous video that probably most Americans have seen. It's probably like part of pop culture by now, of when he broke Babe Ruth's record, rounding the bases. Random fans were running onto the field, and this was in the 1970s, and like shaking his hand, and it was a huge celebration. And I think that it's so striking that this book has him as the forward, because not only is he one of the greatest baseball players ever, but he also started out in the Negro Leagues. So it really, at least for me, it showed that we are not that far removed from having an entirely segregated baseball system in the United States of America. And it's incredible that if that had happened 10 years later, Hank Aaron would not have been the home run king. And it's just striking to me how everything happened when it did, but it shouldn't have taken that long, and we're still not even that far removed from the Negro Leagues being a league and baseball being segregated. So those are my thoughts on this book. The images itself are something to check out. Even if you're not a baseball fan, if you just like looking at pictures, they're amazing. These pictures are, they said they're in some museums. It's really awesome. This book won the Coretta Scott King Award, and it was nominated for some other awards too in 2008. It is just so good. I highly recommend. Even if you're not a sports person, I would still say check it out just for the history of it. So yeah, that's my review of this book. I hope it was helpful, and I hope one day you'll be able to pick it up and check it out.